Hello there everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you very much for joining me today. Now with today's video I'm actually going to be presenting you guys with something I've actually been wanting to do for a little while, but I figured that with the news that Dimensions End will be giving out a limited amount of resources and a pretty large amount of them as well throughout the month of July, I figured that now would be the best time for me to present my Journey Through Dimensions End series. So with these videos I'm going to present you 3 DE tiers at a time, so this is all going to be Entropy. I'm not going to go over Order or Chaos or anything like that, it's all going to be Entropy, so that I can give you guys a little bit of help or a bit of a push, a bit of a start to going through Dimensions End in as quick and efficient a fashion as possible. And I'm going to outline basically what the enemies that you can expect that they're going to do, what characters are really appropriate for bringing along to each tier, and then sort of solo clears, give you resources in the comment or in the description box and places that you can look. All sorts of different things to help you get through tiers 1 through to 13 as quickly as possible so you can get those resources through July. Now today's video is going to take us through tiers 1, 2 and 3, so I'm going to also provide footage of my own clears of these particular tiers whilst I go over each fight themselves and give you guys some advice. So if that's something you guys are interested in, then stay tuned and keep on watching. As always everybody, don't forget to check out all of the social media links in the description box below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord and Patreon. Twitch this week we've just been going over everything that's happened with the story chapter and Abyss. It's actually quite a lot of content spread out over the course of time, so I've actually managed to split it up into multiple streams, so definitely come and check out my Twitch channel, which is linked in the description box below if you want to come along and check that out. And with Patreon, I always shout out one of my patrons at random to give a massive thank you and appreciation to each and every person who decides to support the channel further, and today that person is going to be Shiro Okazaki, so thank you very much for your support. It means the absolute world to me, as everyone who watches my videos is very well aware of, I'm sure. And of course, definitely with these videos more than any other, do be sure to check out all the other websites there are available for Opera Omnia, so that's Dissidia Info, Dissidia DB, Tombury Tube, as many of these websites will have clears that are different from mine, things that you can do to research which characters work for Dimensions End tiers, all sorts of things, so I'll be sure to leave lots of links in the description box below with regards to that. And of course, don't forget to check out all of the other content creators and social media people that there are on the internet, that there are besides me. So first things first, let's try and tackle Dimensions End Entropy Tier 1. Now this is obviously going to be a step up from a lot of content that a lot of newer players have experienced, but one thing to bear in mind here is that summon boards are definitely something that plays into this. So when this came out, there were probably only maybe 3 summon boards available, whereas now there are 7 approaching 8. And the stat increases that you get from all those summon boards are actually really quite significant. So if you're still struggling with it, maybe check out your summon boards, your artifacts, things like that, and make sure that your characters are at the maximum potential they can be before taking them into Dimensions End. Similarly, with this being the first tier, you don't want to take characters that are too strong. Like, you could easily blitz this with characters that have been released within the last couple of months, but honestly, you don't want to be taking characters that are too strong for this tier, because you then won't be able to use them in higher ones. As you can see here, I've taken Agrius, Tidus and Ramza. Now, Ramza actually just has his base EX here. No book, no ingots, no anything. If you have Ramza, or you have him purpled or anything like that, then you could probably save him for a higher tier. Now the main focus of this particular fight is that the enemies are magic resistant, so don't take any magic damage dealers whatsoever. And then the other thing that you want to bear in mind is that enemies in this like to do AoE HP attacks quite frequently. So if you have healers, the reason Agrius works so well is because she's a decent damage dealer. She's obviously not that great by today's standards, but at the time she was on one of the highest damage tier. She did healing with her brave framed buff, she just had a lot of utility. Debuffers are really good in this, and obviously she has access to paralysis, so she's perfect for this. So she's one of the best characters there are for it. But obviously if you don't have her, then we'll get to other recommended characters in a little while. So the main thing you want to bear in mind with these particular fights is wave 3 and 5 are your main boss fights, 1, 2 and 4 are just trash waves. However, with the trash waves, do keep an eye on the little dragons that are within those waves, because they also like to do AoE brave HP attacks, so just be careful of them and make sure you kill them as quickly as possible, for no other reason really than you want to keep your turn count as tight as possible. Now, The way that a lot of people can struggle with him is actually wave 3, which is the prominence or their bombs, and basically they get the main prominence like swells, gets bigger, and then it does a big brave HP attack AoE, and it hurts your party pretty nastily, and it can wipe you out if you're not prepared for it. So basically you want to bring characters that deal AoE damage along so that you can just try and make sure that the little bombs aren't too much of a problem, they're not getting overwhelming, but you can still focus your damage at the very least on the primary one. Debuffing their speed or debuffing their attack is also going to be very helpful here. So the reason that I've brought Tidus along is because his damage isn't really good enough to take to higher tiers, although I have seen clears using Tidus in higher tiers, but he's still got 100% AoE damage on his EX, he's got those lovely debuffs from his slash combo, he's just going to get the job done really nicely. And then similarly, making your damage bursty actually helps quite a lot, so the reason I brought Ramza here is because of his offensive-based auras, but there are a lot of characters that you can take along for this. Wave 5, you're going to have the King Behemoth and the Humbaba. The main thing that you're going to want to worry about here is Humbaba and the fact that it has the Humbaba breath attack, which can delay a character by up to 5 turns. Now you don't want that to happen, so this will be the wave where you primarily want to use your summon. You want to make sure that you keep on top of the King Behemoth because he's got some nasty AoE brave HP attacks as well. Keeping them debuffed, keeping them just under control is going to help you a great deal. Now in terms of recommended characters, like I said, Agrias does absolutely phenomenally well here. Null is actually an extremely popular character here as well, so if you've picked up Null more recently, then he can work very well with just a book, or back when this first came out, he was used with his base EX. Lots of early characters are going to do very well here, like Cloud was used quite a lot, Vincent was used a relatively large amount, Lillicet was used quite a lot, although I actually prefer Lillicet in slightly later tiers. Warrior of Light was really good here as well. Again, I prefer him in slightly higher tiers. Locke is actually a pretty decent character here as well if you have him awakened. I would only bring him along if you do have him awakened though, because without a book or ingots or anything like that, his damage is a little bit on the low side, and you want to get as much damage as possible. But he does provide that healing, debuff, turn efficiency that you would want in a character like this. So as long as you've got characters that can deal a decent amount of damage in a short space of time, Noctis is actually a really good character for this. If you haven't got him completely awakened, I've seen quite a few clears of Noctis with 0 out of 3, because when he got his EX plus a little bit early, it was still a little bit lackluster for that time, but for this point in time, he's actually very powerful. He's got AoE damage, he has turn manipulation, he has defense down through his point blank warp strike. He's actually pretty good here as well. If you've got Barsh and you aren't waiting for his LD to come out, he could provide a pretty serious tank for this as well because of his ability to soak up AoE HP damage. Squall is another great damage dealer for this because he has 100% AoE damage. There's lots of characters. If you're wanting to take characters that you're maybe not saving for higher tiers, characters even like Lise, things like that, then this is probably the best place to take them. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be able to talk all the way through every single thing that happens within the Dimensions End tiers, because obviously the video would be hours and hours long, but I will leave you guys with the clears remaining of my own clear so you can see it being done by myself and using the team that I've used. But the other thing I did want to mention as well is there are a lot of players out there that are curious about solo clears. Now, I don't personally do solo clears. I don't feel a need to do them. However, I think that players who don't have a large number of EXs in general and are just sort of sniping specific ones, then solo clears are actually going to be really helpful for you. I don't do them myself, but I've actually left a link in the description box below for a Reddit page that showcases lots of different solo clears for each Dimensions End tier, and I actually wanted to really turn attention to that because I think it'd be really helpful to a lot of people. But with Dimensions End 1, I will, with every tier, I will list a few characters that have the potential to be able to solo it, as long as you've got them max artifacts, max summon board, get them as strong as you physically can if you're wanting to use them to solo anything, because they're going to need to be as strong as they can get. But with Dimensions End 1, characters that have the potential, and there are probably more characters that I'm not listing, but I know for a fact that I've seen clears, we're using 8, Jack, Lightning, and Kater that have all done Dimensions End 1 solo. As a matter of fact, Kater can do quite a lot of the early ones by herself, so if you're struggling to get through Dimensions End, then Kater might be a great pick for you. But for the time being, I shall leave you with the rest of this clear, and then after that we will move on to Dimensions End Entropy Tier 2. Okay, so now let's move on to Dimensions End Entropy Tier 2. Now with Entropy 1, it was magic resistant. Now with this one, it's physical resistant. So you realistically only want to be bringing magic damage dealers, magic-based supports, characters like that. Now with the enemies themselves, waves 2 to 4 are trash waves. They're very simple enemies that realistically you just kind of want to take out as quickly and efficiently as possible. So a well-placed AoE Brave HP attack will take these out without much of a problem. If you can make sure that you can just try and tighten up your turn count as much as possible within any Dimensions End tier, it's going to help you get that score requirement as quickly as you can. Now wave 1 and 5 are the actual kind of boss waves of the fight, and the first wave contains a Quirl and a Skull Wizard. Now I've spoken about Skull Wizards many times on this channel being really irritating for the fact that they can just kind of go, oh by the way, Candle in the Wind HP attack and one of your characters is dead. Very frustrating, so just be very cautious of that, and bear in mind that they do kind of, you know, say that they're about to use Candle in the Wind by saying the brazenly smirks above their head. And then the Quirl, while not quite as dangerous in terms of actually killing your party members, it can really put a hamper on your turn count by inflicting debuffs like Confuse and Paralysis, things that stop you being able to control your characters and just like eating into your turn count. So make sure that you've got ways of getting around these debuffs, or at least not having to worry about them, because they do only last for a turn or two. Confuse is particularly annoying, but even because it basically puts one of your characters on auto, so as long as you can just deal with that, you're going to want to have like healing or attack down debuffs to deal with the Candle in the Wind attack or anything that the Skull Wizard can offer. Then the final wave is a Axel Turbo, which is a Magitech armor, and a Griffin. Now, the Griffin will use HP attacks pretty regularly, so you want to keep that under control. The Magitech armor isn't nearly as threatening, but has AoE attacks, so just make sure that you keep your bravery up as much as you can, and that will help a great deal. The Griffin also has a low chance to charm your characters, which is another debuff that basically means you skip your turn. So try and take out the Griffin before you take out the Axel Turbo, and that should help. But basically, as with any high difficulty content, make sure the enemies stay broken as often as you can, make sure your bravery stays up as much as possible so they don't break you, and obviously try to keep your HP up as much as possible. Not just because it makes sense to keep your HP up, but obviously there is an HP requirement on each of these fights, and if any of your characters die, then your score just goes straight down the toilet, so you're going to want to avoid that happening at pretty much all costs. Now the team that I've taken to this particular fight is Ace with 0 out of 3, or just a book, no ingots. Rem with a single ingot because it increased her bravery hit count on her EX, and therefore it made her so she was dealing a bit more damage. And a 3 out of 3 full purple Sarah. Now Sarah is probably a little bit too strong for this particular fight, but bringing her allowed me to bring other characters that didn't have quite as much sort of investment into them. So Ace is actually the character that was recommended most when this tier came out. So as long as, but you could replace him with literally any AoE damage dealer with magic. So like, I mean, obviously a character like Cloud of Darkness is going to be a bit too good for this. So it's important to try and make sure you're matching the power level of the event that you're going into, so that you're not using your strongest characters too early, because you might want to use them later, because the heretic nature of these particular fights means that you can only bring each character once. So Ace was a character that was really highly recommended because he had a good enough like sort of damage per turn, he had a good sort of damage output, made it so that the characters were broken or the enemies were broken as much as possible. I actually, in my first clear, because bear in mind that all of the stuff that I'm showing you here up here is actually re-clears that I've done of Dimensions End so that I could free certain characters for whatever reason. I actually used Kuja as my first clear for this, as well as Deuce as a support character and Charlotta with her base EX. Now I actually re-cleared this because I wanted to get Charlotta back out because I knew that her EX realization was coming up soon and I kind of want to use her for a later tier. And this is something to bear in mind as well. So even though I say don't use your strongest characters until later, using some of your stronger characters to clear and then go back to them once you've picked up some more isn't actually a bad thing. But for the purposes of trying to clear things in a time frame so that you can get all of these resources that are being offered up for July, then for this particular sort of time frame, you want to kind of try and elevate your power level in conjunction with the power level that's increased with each increasing entropy tier. So in terms of other characters that you could use for Dimensions End Entropy 2, the way I'm going to try and word this is because I think that it's important to look at the roles that the characters play that you're taking to these Dimensions End tiers rather than specific characters, because honestly these are made with the intention that you've got a wide variety of characters you can bring as long as you can fulfill the roles that are needed. So obviously you're going to want a magic damage dealer. Now, whether that be Ace or Kuja, who I used the first time around when I actually cleared this, or anybody else similar, like it could be Ultimisia. I think Ultimisia is a little bit strong for this in particular, but she can be used quite well for this. There's a lot of damage dealers, like even like more recent ones, like Kefka can be used for this. In fact, Kefka is one of the characters that can solo this particular tier with his EX realization, and having seen so like quite recently, there's a lot of characters that you can take in terms of magic damage, but you want to be able to use AoE brave damage so that you can keep the enemies broken for as long as possible. And then a support character that is magic based is obviously going to do very well here. So whether it be Charlotta, who I used when I originally cleared this, Deuce for the same reason. You've got Kryl, who has got a fantastic brave battery. I actually used Kryl in a much later tier, but she is also very good here. You've got Sarah, who is a magic debuffer. Debuffs are always going to be helpful, so Lilith can also work here as well. You've got Rem, who I've used in my own team. The reason I've used Rem is because she has healing in her kit, so you want to be able to like keep your health up as much as you can in every tier, as I said earlier, but Rem is also really good for bringing good buffs along with her, giving as many turns to Ace or Sarah as possible so that you've got that good damage. Sarah I actually really like here, even if you take her with just a book or just her base EX. Even when this first came out, Sarah was used quite a lot with her base EX. She works quite well because she has 100% AoE damage on her EX. She's got debuffs, she's got brave batterying, she's got nice offensive buffs for magic based characters. She's going to work really well for you as well. Aerith, if you wanted to use her for a similar reason, you've got buffs, you've got healing, you've got decent magic damage. Again, Aerith is probably a little bit strong for this, but characters that were used very frequently for this particular tier are the ones that I've mentioned here. Y'shtola is another one that's actually very popular, but Y'shtola is one of those great characters that you can kind of slot in anywhere. She works really well because she has all the healing you would ever need. She's got delay in her kit. She's, as long as like an enemy doesn't outright resist her, she's got stone, which is really useful. She's just very, very good all around. So if you're struggling for characters to put into this, then you could use Y'shtola. But like I said, you could slot her in pretty much any tier that doesn't resist magic, from tiers 1 all the way up to like 8 or 9. She's just really good in general. But in terms of the roles that you want, you just want high magic damage, a support that does magic damage, and then some sort of like healing or ability to ward off HP damage, because you still need to be able to clear the event without having sunk under that HP requirement. Before we move on to Dimensions End Entropy 3, the only other characters I can think of that I've seen solo this particular event are Kefka, as I mentioned earlier, and Keita. Both magic damage dealers, both have, Kefka can just make it so that he doesn't take HP damage at all, and there will be a link in the description box below for that Reddit post that I found, and you can watch that particular clear there. And then Keita's actually very good at soloing a lot of the early Dimensions Entropy tiers, so if you don't actually have her, or if you don't have a lot of EXs, then in the future banner when she comes around, she may be a character you may want to go for. So now we can talk about the third and final entropy tier that we're going to talk about in this particular video, DE3. Now, DE3 is mostly about characters, enemies that buff themselves a lot and inflict a lot of bravery damage. So tanks are going to be really, really helpful here. And obviously making sure that they don't buff themselves too much is going to be really helpful as well. So a lot of people are going to use dispel characters or debuffing characters like that will really help out. So wave 1, 2 and 4 are all trash waves, so you want to try and take these all out as efficiently and quickly as possible. I do say that if you've got an AoE Brave HP attack, that's like in a skill, but honestly, like as long as you've got ways of killing them with just your HP attack, that's preferable, because obviously using your skill uses up during these trash waves isn't ideal. But if you've got one move that is just going to wipe them all out, don't be afraid to do so, because it can actually help you in terms of your turn count quite a lot. Now, wave 3 has Marilith and Lich. Now, this one actually has the 4 fiends in it, which is quite cool. The Marilith can be an absolute pain in the backside because she inflicts horrible debuffs to you, so you want to make sure that you've got no issues with debuffs. So you've got a way of like preventing them, or at least buffing over them. Is going to help you out a great deal. And then the Lich will also do very similar things, like lots of debuffs, lots of buffs to himself, and you want to be able to keep your damage up as high as possible. And then wave 5 has Tiamat and Kraken. The Tiamat will do the attack, the whirlwind attack that it always does. It reduces all your bravery to 1, and then it'll also do a big charge up attack where it will just unleash this huge AoE Brave HP attack unless you do something about it, and it will buff itself a lot just beforehand. The Kraken has a lot of sort of Brave HP attacks. It's got a sort of slight speed downs, things like that, stuff that's just going to really make it a slog to get through. So while Tiamat is probably your best bet to go for first in this wave, don't ignore Kraken, because like as much as like Tiamat's the one that's likely to just like wipe your party in one go, Kraken's the one that's going to wear you down to a point where that can happen, so just be very careful. In terms of characters, the first character I'm going to talk about is one that's in my team here, which is Joesephyr. This tier is all about debuffs, right? So, and the fact that the enemies can buff themselves and they put loads of debuffs on you. Joesephyr basically just makes it so none of that can happen. Her EX makes it so that they can't buff themselves, and in particular mention, Tiamat and Marilith are the characters you really don't want to buff themselves, because they can get very out of control very quickly. And equally, one of the debuffs that Marilith puts on you is max HP down. So if you've got a way of just throwing that back at the enemy, then you can make your life so much easier, because they don't resist that from Joesephyr. So if you've got a way of just throwing it back at them, then you're just going to be laughing the whole way home. If you don't have Joesephyr, then characters like Faris will work quite well here. Anyone with a large number of debuffs will work well, especially if they have access to AoE damage, because obviously with the bosses coming in 2s, you want to be able to get that dispel off as quickly, or get the dispel, get the debuffs as much as you physically can. I also put Warrior of Light here because I think that having a tank is really important, but Zac and Snow are a bit too strong for this particular tier. Like, you'll want to use them later, whereas Warrior of Light has the shields up, so when Marilith starts coming in with absolute chaos and starts like mincing through your bravery, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with if you have a high shield, your bravery's not coming off nearly as much. There's a slight amount of debuff evasion in Warrior of Light's kit as well, so like, well, while it's not quite as efficient as say Lena, it is something that's quite nice to have access to. And then past that, you're just going to want a decent AoE damage dealer. I actually put Sephiroth here. The first time I cleared this, I actually went through it with Rem and Ultimisia, and I was literally just using Rem to just pass everything off to Ultimisia, because she was like the best sort of damage dealer, AoE damage dealer at the time, and with all the free turns and things like that you get out of her, she does help quite a lot. But I wanted to make use of Sephiroth, to be honest, because it's one of those characters that I purpled, and I was like, oh no, I'm not sure I should have done that. But he actually worked pretty well in this particular tier. If you've got speed down on top of Sephiroth's speed down aura, it does actually make quite a big difference, and I found it very helpful, especially in conjunction. Like, I mean, I tried taking Leviathan with this team as well, but honestly, you need the attack up, because when they start boosting their stats, making it so that like the chaos style wave of the fact that their stats just go up as their health goes down, it's going to be a lot more of a struggle for you to deal that amount of damage in the time that you need it to do. However, the AoE 100% Black Materia damage, on top of the fact that you had like this massive Brave Shave in Octaslash and Fervent Blow, it really did help more than I actually expected it to. Ultimisia is the character that most people used for this tier when it came out, but again, as I said with tier 1, because summon boards have come out, like so many of them since this was originally a thing, because the first 5 all came out at once, you see. And because there's so many more stats nowadays, you have a bit more of a wider scope of characters that you can use for this. I actually used Lilith the first time that I used this because I wanted the debuffs as much as possible and keeping the buffs on top of it. You could use Hope if you wanted to, but Hope is probably a little bit on the strong side for this. In fact, he's almost definitely a bit on the strong side for this because you might want to use him later. But there are a lot of characters that are just high buff, high debuff, debuff prevention. Perhaps if you have Lena and you don't necessarily want to use the ingot, like all the ingots on her, then you could use her here. I think she's way too good in later tiers to use here. But basically, as long as you have access to buffs, debuffs, and bravery damage prevention, then it's going to be a lot easier for you. So Agrias is another character that you could use here if you didn't already use her in Dimensions N1 because of her access to paralysis, her healing, her AoE brave HP damage. Her silence is actually very helpful here as well for certain parts of the fight. There's a lot of characters that are just good damage dealers. Like Agrias is like one of the best characters for early DE that there is, and there's honestly, like, looking at some of the characters that other people have used, Barsh is a character that's been used because AoE brave HP, tank that's not going to get used in later tiers, so if you don't have Warrior of Light, he's a character that you could make use of. Some people have used Cloud here, although I personally think that Cloud is most recommended for the tier after this, but if you've got loads of damage dealers, tier 4 is probably one of the easier Dimensions N tier, so if you didn't particularly want to use Cloud there, if you wanted to solo that particular fight, then you could use Cloud here instead. Kuja and Ace are actually used quite commonly here as well as in Dimensions N2 just because they're high, well, they're high at the time at least, high damage dealing AoE mages. Like, they're going to be quite useful here as well. In terms of solo clears, I've seen Jack do a really good job of this as well as DE1, so if you've got Jack, then you could just take him and he'd be able to just clear through it, just because the turn manipulation that he has access to is going to be really powerful. And then you've also got he's just raw damage and he has evasion on top of it. So basically, if you want to solo something, you either want as much delay as you can physically get, or you want to make sure that you've got just evasion so that they're just never going to hit you. Similarly, Kefka and Kater again can solo this particular fight, and as I've said before, I shall leave a link in the description box below for the link that I've got to show you all of the different solo clears that you could take along. But they're like, those three are the premier ones. Like, so if you've got Jack, Kefka, and Kater obviously isn't quite out just yet, but if you have Jack and Kefka, then it's going to make your life going through the early DE tiers that much easier. So that's going to be all from today's video. I hope that basically having the footage up here of me clearing stuff, having the information on different characters that work well for Dimensions N, making sure that you guys remember that maxing out your stats through artifacts, weapon passives, character boards, summon boards, make the characters that you bring to Dimensions End as powerful as you physically can, because this is currently the end game content of the game. It's going to be absolutely paramount. I hope that just reminding yourselves of that will actually help you through this as well. Hopefully the information that I've given here and all of the links I leave in the description box below for all of the different websites, all of the different Reddit posts, all the stuff that I've found, just to give you guys a bit more of guidance through Dimensions End, at least in the early tiers, is going to help you guys get through it as quickly as possible. Next video I will make will be in the next few days. We'll cover tiers 4, 5 and 6, so you'll have that to look forward to. Obviously I've got Should You Pull videos coming out, I've got streams that are all coming up as well, so if you need to ask any questions, then feel free to let me know in either Discord. I've got a lovely community on Discord that will happily help you out with any of the Dimensions End tiers as well, so definitely come and ask along in that. And of course, don't forget to like the video, share it out, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications and all of that good stuff that YouTubers tell you to do. Anyways, that's going to be it from me, and I shall speak to you all soon. Take care.